want to talk to you tonight about building a fighting Democratic Party, something that we desperately need and we don't really have in a full enough way right now, and specifically in using primaries to do that. Or as the subhead here says from Kat Abighazali, who's running in Illinois 9 right now, what if we didn't suck? So the choice, we believe, is that activists in California are going to have to make a choice between what's difficult or frankly what's impossible. We can either begin the hard work of rebuilding the Democratic Party by using primary challenges, by unseating some of the incumbents that are in place right now, or we can leave them there and we can resign ourselves to endless and pretty much futile attempts to pressure a Democratic leadership which is committed, deeply committed, to a path of caution, collusion, and all too often surrender. It looks something like this. It's really no choice at all. We just can't accept that future if we want to succeed. I'd ask you to think back and ask yourself, how many times have you clearly seen, looking forward a few days or a week or a month, how bad things were going to get? How many times have you heard people imploring Democrats to act, giving them advice? You must do this now. The time is at the moment. You've got to seize it. How many times were you there asking them to fight back, or your group? And how many times have they ignored those warnings? And we've seen catastrophic results as a result of that. I want to be clear, though, that we're not talking about all Democrats everywhere. We're not talking about rank and file. I'm specifically talking about the Democrats who are running the show in Washington, congressional Democrats. And the Democratic Party itself is not an institution. There's not like one building with a door on it. You can knock on the door and ask to speak to the Democratic Party. Instead, it's a cluster of power centers. Democratic leaders are only the most visible part of that. The leaders themselves are heavily influenced by two other power centers, by wealthy donors and by a network of consultants who are there cycle in and electoral cycle out. And all three are committed, above all, to maintaining the status quo, both in our society as they're trying to manage it, but especially within their caucus, within the party. They want to keep the status quo the way it is, and they want to preserve their own power. And they've been very, very successful at that. Here are some of the players of that structure. Together, they've created a system that's self-reinforcing. Power is concentrated in leadership's hands, and this is increasingly true over the last 30 years. It's become more and more and more centralized in the House and in the Senate. They control the donations coming into the party and how they get doled out. They control the legislation, what's allowed to be raised or come to the floor or not, including omnibus bills where they pack everything in and people find out at the last minute what's in it and are just told how to vote. They control who rises in the party and who's punished. And they're also held in place, though, by a caucus that is chosen by them in the sense that they seed the field for elections. And they're also dependent on them. So they're in their leadership positions because they're voted in place by a bunch of people who also depend heavily upon them. But the problem is that the status quo that they're dedicated to maintaining, the one that gives them power and prosperity, is broken. The party itself is stuck. It's aging. It's unable to adapt or renew itself as long as that status quo has a grip on it. And our country's system, which is much more important, is weakened and it's failing. We can see that every day. We have to rebuild it. So they've been very successful at maintaining their status quo. But what Democratic leaders have not been successful at is fighting Trump's fascist takeover, or putting the interests of ordinary Americans first, or unrigging a system that's crushing working people right now, or even holding out a vision for the future where freedom and opportunity aren't just empty words, particularly that come to you in a fundraising email or right before an election. Unfortunately, they're still playing the old game, and that old game cannot compete with a new game of fascism. In fact, fascism appreciates that old game because it eats it for lunch. Congressional Democrats are still seeking compromise. They're still enamored of bipartisanship after all these years. They're still trying to wait Trump out, avoid bold action, and hope to be rewarded at election time. They're doing that right now, even with Iran. They're still following the polls rather than leading, and they are still afraid of upsetting their big donors. There's only one conclusion for this. They are not going to change. We've tried many, many years to persuade them, to control them, to pressure them. They're not going to do it. They like it the way it is. They're not going to change. But they can be replaced. Maya Angelou warned us about this a long time ago. This is definitely not our first time, but let's please make it our last. We need to recognize this for what it is. And unfortunately, we as activists, absolutely include myself in this, for too many years have had a blind spot. We contributed to this mess by focusing just on the need to get Democrats elected. We did it for a great reason. We knew we needed to defeat MAGA. We thought the best way to do that was just getting Dems elected, no matter who. We saw primaries as a waste of resources. We saw them as divisive. We saw incumbents just as safe seats. Not even as candidates in some ways, but just as safe seats, not barriers to a vigorous party. And we put the essential work of rebuilding the party on hold, kind of like Dem leaders. We too were waiting. We were waiting for a time that was going to be better for us. Well, we can't wait any longer. We have to have a party that confronts and opposes MAGA relentlessly, that doesn't wait a beat to do that, that goes out right away and grabs them and won't let go. We need a party that fights for working people, not corporate donors. We need a party that forces through bold structural changes to unrig the systems that we're facing, and we need a party that offers a vision of hope and freedom for the future. And Indivisible National agrees. They have a primaries campaign right now that's going on around the country. They haven't focused on California. It's up to us to do that. But when they surveyed their members, the results were very much in line with everything that I've told you so far. The members wanted to see fighter posture and willingness to confront, people power, a bold agenda, new and principled leadership, both generational change, but also moral courage and not careerism. And it's not even just Indivisible National. The time is right. The public is fed up with the Democratic leadership's waited-out strategy. They need representatives who are going to fight for them now, for their housing now, for their health care now, for their child care now, for their economic insecurity now. They know our society is broken, and they know that neither party is fixing it. And they hunger for representatives who will use power for their benefit. The good news is, and William Gibson gave us this quote a long time ago, but it's true right now, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. We have great leaders in place. We have great leaders in the waiting. We have people running for Congress who are incredibly exciting, and people who are incredibly exciting who have just taken office. We need to recognize that our time is now, and we can rebuild the Democratic Party. We have the leaders, but they're shut out by those controlling the party's power centers. If you are doing dishes and you're not on mute, it would be great if you could mute yourself. Thanks. It's time right now for that to change. It really is time for us to do this this cycle. We have the antidote, or we have the tool in our hands. We had one thing missing from the original Indivisible Guide, which was primaries. So ironically, the Indivisible Guide from 2016 was based on the Tea Party model. Both Leah and Ezra had been Hill staffers when the Tea Party was in its ascendancy. They saw how effective it was at pressuring Congress, and they said, you know what, we could do that, but we could do it for good rather than for bad. However, the one thing that they left out was something that the Tea Party actually used relentlessly, which was primaries to remake their party. They understood something that we are only realizing now, which is you change leadership when you need that by changing their caucus, by changing the people who elect them. We also need to recognize the power of a message that meets the moment. An example of that is what happened with the affordability issue as a topic. G. Elliott Morris found when he studied it that the place where affordability went party-wide was in June 2025 when Mamdani won this primary in New York City. So there's a lesson for us here. The lesson is, instead of always focusing on flip districts and trying to figure out what's going to make people happy there and how do we win those districts, in addition to that, we also need to focus on where does meaningful change really start. And that tends to be in deep blue districts where it's safe to try new things and where you can really get some traction. In that case, even though he's shown here with two centrist candidates, with Mikey Sherrill, with Abigail Spanberger, it was Mamdani's win in deep blue New York City that started that effort. And we should recognize that a movement can produce a domino effect, particularly when what it's replacing is ready to collapse. So what do we need? We need leaders who are relentless, who are fighters, not folders. Fighters who realize their job description is not just legislator, it's confronting and opposing the fascists with all available means. Fighters for a society that's just and fair and unrigged, and fighters who will fight for all Americans, not just the wealthy and powerful. We need them to be unafraid, not afraid of fascists or donors or consultants or telling the truth, just not afraid. We need them to be bold. Donald Trump did not break our system or our country. He exploited one that was already falling apart. The system we have right now is rigged. It's a heads I win, tails you lose game that rewards the rich while bleeding everyone else dry. And we're now past the breaking point. If you haven't yourself personally in the last 48 hours experienced this with a customer service or some other interaction with a largely monopolized company that is doing whatever the heck they want because they can, then lucky you. We need bold structural changes to unrig the whole economy, but also our political system, which is heavily tilted right now and being broken actively by MAGA. And we can't get by with incremental patches that are designed to keep the status quo just limping along, things that are designed just to placate us, but not to really change anything fundamentally. We need leaders who are visionary. Although we need fighters, not folders, it's not just about what we're fighting against, it's also what we're fighting for. And Mamdani's campaign in New York City, again, is the clearest and most instructive recent example. It was bold in its commitment to a better future and describing that actively, but also grounded in specific fixes to the system that were going to address people's pain points right now, immediately. As Waleed Shahid wrote about it, it's a diagnosis, it's a solution, it's also a theory of power. So, what do we do? We need to fill enough seats with fighters to sway the House Democratic caucus. We're not going to replace half the caucus, but we need a critical mass there to build that power that can replace the leadership team. Get people in with a new mindset who aren't stuck in a 30-year-old mindset and don't refuse to see what's right in front of their eyes. In doing that, we can sideline their donors and their consultants and build a party that can fight back and create a system that benefits everyone, not just the greedy few. We need to look across key dimensions in terms of what would that candidate look like? What do we expect them to deliver? Well, we need to evaluate them looking at opposition and consequences, their freedom from undue influence, their ability or their commitment to unrigging systems, both economic and political, and they're having a grounded vision. And then within each, we can ask questions to decide, are they really strong in this point or are they weak? So what are opposition and consequences? Well, defeating fascism requires confrontation and opposition, which means fighting despite the cost or obstacle, not weighing whether or not it's going to poll well or it's going to win, fighting because it's the right thing to do, no matter what. With intensity of purpose, something that Republicans have shown and Democrats largely have not, and opposing the fascists without compromise. Not saying, well, we'll bargain with you on this, just saying no. No is enough. Doesn't have to be more than that. It also requires imposing consequences, something Brazil has shown us how to do, but we have not. So making the wrongdoers, regardless of their status, from the very top to the very bottom, pay a severe price for their behaviors, or we should say for their crimes. We need people who are going to be free from influence. Right now, they're heavily influenced by wealthy donors and corporations who have rigged the system. We need politicians who reject that money, who are seeking contributions instead from the people that they're committed to serving everyday Americans, not folks who are on call time trying to get large donations during most of every day, but are listening to us instead. We need people who are willing to unrig the systems, the economic and political systems that are intertwined and stacked in favor of the wealthy and the powerful. We need them committed to bold structural change, who are willing to say, well, it hasn't been done before, but that's what we're going to do. Folks, 100 years plus ago, this is what happened with the 14th Amendment. It was rammed through by people who realized they had a golden opportunity at that moment to make things fairer and more just for Americans. They took that opportunity. They didn't look back. We need that mindset now in this moment. And we need candidates with a clear, compelling vision of the future, one that's grounded in the actions that they will take now to materially improve people's lives. And there's one question above all that we need to ask them, which is, are they willing to will they commit rather to removing and replacing current Democratic leadership, which, if left in place, is going to continue to deliver the same weak responses that we've been seeing in the last year, and frankly that we've been seeing a lot longer than that. We cannot afford to wait. This is up to us. If we want new leaders who are relentless, who are unafraid, who are bold, and who are visionary, we need to model those behaviors ourselves as we begin the work to rebuild a more robust, healthy Democratic Party that's capable of defeating fascism. Our time really is now. We need to get to work. So, then how do we do this? Well, the goal, and this is, we've got a small group that's working statewide to try to give tools and advice and inspiration to groups around the state. But the goal is to run and elect as many qualified challenger candidates as possible, particularly in California's safe blue districts, both against incumbents and in open races. And there are some districts where, frankly, the districts aren't safe, but there are very promising candidates, and we can consider some of them as well. Wherever possible, we want to emphasize incumbents who are really impediments, and you've seen some of those over the last year or so. And then we want to publicize the movement nationally so that we can build up steam and take what we're learning here and share it. The most powerful thing that we can do, and we are committed to following this path here in Indivisible Sonoma County, is to endorse a challenger candidate, to use a rigorous process to identify them and then work to get them elected. In some districts or with some groups, they may choose instead to promote a challenger candidate or to promote the need for primary challenges and provide criteria. Again, here in Indivisible Sonoma County, we've got a team that's going to be engaging in the process of research to endorse candidates in our two competitive races. So we are going to be trying to do this as a network. We do have a statewide network team that has been making the case publicly for the need to do this, that's providing focus by identifying races, and has built some tools for us to use. We see groups that are forming district councils, so within a congressional district, indivisible groups coming together to share resources and ultimately, hopefully, to share endorsements if they land on the same candidate, to just raise their voices and make them stronger. But the unit of decision making is still going to lie with local groups like ours, where we decide how we want to participate, engage our members, which is with the purpose of me talking with you right now, and then to take part in the rigorous process of endorsement. The network will look something like this. So here in Indivisible County, why are we recommending endorsement? Well, because primary challengers face an uphill battle against incumbents who can count on party support, an existing donor base, familiarity, and frankly, voter inertia. You know, I know the name. What the heck? I've always voted for them. Why wouldn't I do that now? The best way to fully support challengers is to endorse them and then to campaign for them. That's our ambition. We haven't decided whether or not to endorse Audrey Denny, but Sunrise has, so I pulled this shot from them as an example. Endorsing a candidate's the strongest thing we can do because it puts our organization on their side. It does require the most work. There's research, there's evaluation. It's a pretty thorough process. Working with a district council, we may be able to build some capacity there. We're going to explore that. But we need to remember that the effort needs to be seen in the context of the reward. We're doing this because our group feels really strongly that we must have a viable, robust Democratic opposition. It's worth the effort. We have two primaries where we have what we would call viable challengers or viable candidates in the race. And what we're defining by viable is somebody who is either an incumbent, as Mike Thompson is in California 4, or for the rest of the candidates that we've identified, have raised enough resources to actually be able to run a campaign. Sometimes you get people that sign up to run in a campaign, but if they've got $5,000 or $6,000, it's really not a viable amount of money for reaching out to the districts that you see on your map. No way to open an office, no way to hire anybody to help you, really no way to even get a substantial number of bumper stickers or yard signs or whatever, flyers to do the work. So we're not going to evaluate people that we literally think don't have a chance to win. We have competitive races in two of our three primaries. Audrey Denny and Mike McGuire are running in California 1. Eric Jones and Mike Thompson are running in California 4. So we will do research, and we're going to be using tools that have been built by the statewide team. Again, that are grading people basically on 5 dimensions. I put unrigging the economy and the political system together for the sake of the earlier portion of the presentation, but we'll separate those out to ask questions. And then here's an example of the candidate criteria rubric that we'll be using. For grounded vision, we might, for example, ask ourselves, does this person score highly or lowly on the question that they're building or contributing to building a movement for change? Excellent might be somebody who works to build a movement, is collaborating with social movement organizations and other community groups to build pressure for solutions that are going to provide benefit. So an example of that in your politics may be somebody like AOC or Bernie Sanders, who in addition to their work in Congress is actively engaged with outside groups and cheering them on and helping them. Or on the other end of the scale, do we have somebody who's more of a brand manager who wants to manage and diffuse the energy from movements and community demands and will certainly tolerate them, but is not committed to building them or making them go forward. We've taken this rubric and then turned that into a candidate questionnaire, and we've got questions there that mirror elements of the rubric. So, for example, on their willingness to confront and to impose consequences, the question, House Democratic leadership has come under frequent criticism in the last year for fighting harder. Do they agree with this criticism, or would they defend their approach? We want to know what their thinking is on that. We're going to do this research over the next several weeks, and then we will take that. Actually, let me go to a timeline first. We're here in the general meeting. We're making the case, or I'm making the case for you right now, for why endorsement is important. The process is going to look something like this. We will be doing some education for all of you, sharing findings as we get them to some degree, but also helping you understand things like which congressional district are you in now. These are all changing for this next election. We have a primaries team that's going to be doing research, and we'll make an initial recommendation to our team leaders team who will evaluate that, and then we'll come with that recommendation to all of you. We are hoping at the general meeting on April 13th, which will be in person at Finley Center, that we'll be able to get our candidates to that meeting. We haven't finalized that yet, so there may be a little bit of change around this, but that's what we're aiming for. We want to do a candidate forum with the 4 viable candidates and give you a chance to hear them in person. And then we believe there'll be a vote, probably the ability for you to vote that night, or for people who can't make that meeting, either the following day or the day after. We will do vote via Zoom for people who weren't able to be or chose not to vote immediately in the aftermath of the forum. And let me go back to how that will work. Again, we still have to determine their availability, but we will announce the final details for the forum as soon as possible. And the endorsement voting in addition will be the following day or a couple of days later. To be eligible to vote, you'll just need to have attended at least 2 Indivisible Sonoma County meetings within the last 6 months. It's on the honor system, but we do have lists as well of folks who have been in our various meetings. Again, this is the timeline, and if you have questions about, well, it's not even questions. I just wanted to highlight this because it came up a day ago, or I guess that was published a few weeks ago. Because I think one of the questions that's going to come up outside of districts that are fully deep blue is, well, can we afford to go with somebody who's more progressive or is more of a fighter because it's just so important for us to hold the House? This finding is something that we should at least bear in mind, right? The Democrats' real problem isn't being too liberal. That's the party line, in part because it helps them hold the status quo that they've got right now. The folks that they're holding on to are the people who are going to support current leadership. But what G. Elliott Morris found in doing research about this is that the opportunity for Democrats is to repair their image as being seen as weak, and that voters actually want them to fight harder, not to be more moderate. In fact, the Republicans are the ones that own the problem about extremism. It's not the Democrats, right? That's not a Democratic problem. So for the Democrats, as he says here, when Americans say Democrats are out of touch, they don't only or even primarily mean they're too progressive. What they're really worried about is you're just not fighting hard enough. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing.